Ever wonder how a few lines drawn on a map 100 years ago could still be causing chaos today? It sounds like the plot of a spy movie, but it's a true story. It's the story of the Sykes-Picot Agreement, a secret deal that carved up the Middle East and set the stage for a century of conflict. Let's rewind the clock to the middle of World War I. The world is at war, and the Ottoman Empire, once a vast and powerful force, is crumbling. Britain and France, two of the main allied powers, see a golden opportunity. They want to control the Ottoman territories in the Middle East, rich in resources and strategic importance. So, two diplomats, Britain's Sir Mark Sykes and France's François-Georges Picot, get together in secret. Imagine them in a smoke-filled room in London, leaning over a map, drawing lines with a grease pencil. This line, running from near Acre in modern-day Israel to Kirkuk in modern-day Iraq, would become one of the most consequential borders ever drawn. Everything south of that line, including what would become Jordan and southern Iraq, would be under British influence. Everything north, including Syria and Lebanon, would be under French control. Palestine was set aside for international administration, a detail that would later become incredibly complicated. This wasn't just some casual brainstorming session. This was a calculated plan to divide the spoils of war. Sykes was an ambitious, well-traveled aristocrat with a romanticized view of the East. Georges Picot was a career diplomat, determined to secure France's colonial interests. Together, they were architects of a new Middle East, one designed not by the people who lived there, but by imperial powers thousands of miles away. They completely ignored the complex tapestry of ethnic, religious, and tribal groups that had coexisted for centuries. Arabs, Kurds, Sunnis, Shias, Christians, Jews, their loyalties and identities were simply erased by a line on a map. But here's where the plot thickens. While Sykes and Picot were drawing their secret map, Britain was making other, contradictory promises. They were also encouraging an Arab revolt against the Ottomans. A British officer, you might have heard of him, T. Lawrence, or Lawrence of Arabia, was on the ground, promising Arab leaders their own independent, unified Arab state if they helped defeat the Ottomans. The Arabs fought bravely, believing they were fighting for their freedom. They dynamited railways, ambushed Ottoman troops, and played a crucial role in the Allied victory in the region. They were dreaming of a great Arab kingdom, stretching from Syria to Yemen. They had no idea that their British allies had already promised a large chunk of that land to the French. It was a classic case of double dealing on a global scale. The British wanted the Arabs to fight for them, but they had no real intention of honoring their promise of a unified Arab state. Their main goal was to secure their own interests, primarily access to oil and control of the Suez Canal, a vital sea route to India. The promises made to the Arabs were a tool, a means to an end. It was a cynical game of imperial chess, and the Arab people were the pawns. The secrecy couldn't last forever, though. In 1917, after the Russian Revolution, the Bolsheviks found a copy of the secret agreement in the Russian government's archives. And what did they do? They published it, exposing the whole scheme to the world. You can imagine the shock and outrage, especially among the Arab leaders who had put their trust in the British. The promises they had been given were a lie. Their dream of an independent Arab nation was betrayed. The trust between the Arab world and the West was shattered, and the damage from that betrayal has echoed through the decades. When World War I finally ended in 1918, the Sykes-Picot Plan was largely put into action. The Ottoman Empire was dismantled, and new countries were created out of thin air. Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Palestine. Their borders were drawn not according to local realities, but according to the interests of London and Paris. For example, the new state of Iraq was cobbled together from three distinct Ottoman provinces, lumping together Sunni, Shia, and Kurdish populations who had very different histories and identities. This artificial creation was almost guaranteed to be unstable. It's like trying to build a house with bricks that don't fit together. Sooner or later, it's going to collapse. These newly created states were not truly independent. They were mandates, essentially colonies under the administration of Britain and France, who were supposed to guide them towards self-rule. But in reality, this was just colonialism with a different name. The European powers installed friendly rulers, often monarchs from families who would cooperate with them, and they controlled the economies, the armies, and the political systems of these new nations. Any local resistance or movement for true independence was often brutally suppressed. The people of the Middle East had simply traded one master, the Ottomans, for two new ones, the British and the French. The consequences of this imperial carve-up have been devastating and long-lasting. The artificial borders split ethnic and religious groups apart, while forcing rival groups to live together within the same state. This created a foundation of tension and conflict that continues to plague the region today. Think about the Kurds, a large ethnic group with their own language and culture. They were promised a state of their own, but under Sykes-Picot, their homeland was divided among four different countries: Turkey, Syria, Iraq, and Iran. Ever since, they have been a stateless people, often facing persecution and fighting for autonomy. The legacy of Sykes-Picot is also visible in the rise of authoritarian regimes. The rulers installed by the colonial powers often had little popular legitimacy. To stay in power, they relied on repression, strong security forces, and a divide-and-rule strategy, playing different ethnic and religious groups against each other. This prevented the development of inclusive, democratic institutions and fostered a political culture of corruption and cronyism. When citizens don't feel represented by their state, and when the state itself is seen as an artificial, foreign creation, it creates a fertile ground for instability and extremism. In recent years, groups like ISIS have explicitly used the memory of the Sykes-Picot Agreement in their propaganda. They've released videos showing them bulldozing the border berm between Syria and Iraq. Symbolically declaring the end of Sykes-Picot, they tap into a deep-seated and legitimate grievance among many in the region, the feeling that their destiny was stolen from them by foreign powers. They present themselves as the ones who will finally erase these colonial borders and restore a sense of unity, albeit through their own brutal and twisted vision of a caliphate. So, that straight line drawn on a map over a century ago wasn't just a line. It was a fuse. A fuse that lit a century of wars, revolutions, and political turmoil. It is a powerful reminder of how decisions made in secret by a powerful few can have catastrophic consequences for millions of people for generations to come. The story of Sykes-Picot is a complex and often tragic one, but understanding it is essential to understanding the Middle East today. It's not the only factor. Of course, the region's history is incredibly complex, but it is a crucial piece of the puzzle. It's a story of ambition, betrayal, and the dangerous legacy of imperialism. Thanks for watching. If you found this dive into history interesting, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories that explain how our past shapes our present. See you in the next one.